Greta Thunberg seized by the Israelis and said, "Oh, sorry, I'll have a sandwich." Benedict Spence, Conservative commentator, Lord of the Manor, has left the sort of sprawling estate north of Watford Gap and ventured down to town for the afternoon. Was it lunch at the club or something?
Funnily enough, yes. Actually,
Yes,
I have done that amongst other things.
Yes, I thought it was.
I set off last week and I finally reached London.
By horse and cart,
yes, I
presumably from
I
Norfolk.
thought I deserved a hearty lunch of mainly just offal.
How is Norfolk?
It's all right. It's quite flat. Yeah.
Yeah, it is quite flat, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
No, I'm not going to do that because I'll be fine. Where would you? I'm going to let you pick. Reform UK, winter fuel screeching U-turn. That I wanted to start last hour with a joke about that, and I gave it to Danny, who said, if you're brave enough, it's up to you. Which is, I was doing my driving test, and the examiner said, "Can you make a U-turn?" I said, and the rest I'll fill in. Winter fuel, or the insane figure on the front of the Sun today, 4.7 billion migrant hotel bill takes every penny in tax from a workforce the size of the city of Manchester. Let's start with that. I mean, that is, we can all sit here, right, and we can go on and on about, like, this is ludicrous. Something is going to give in this country. I don't care what anybody says, man.
You simply cannot ask people to accept the cuts to their public services as this government is doing and accept the rises in their tax as this government is doing whilst you keep this in place. You need to be able to show people, to demonstrate to people that you're bringing these bills down and that you're reducing the number of people who are coming to the country that are requiring this. If you don't do that, you're not going to win the next election. It's really straightforward. This is at the top of everybody's list of priorities. Not being in London for a very long time, I've had a lot of opportunities to talk to people outside of London.
Yep.
You know, the normal people that the Westminster media constantly tell us that they know exactly who they are. And it doesn't matter if they're Tory voters, Labour voters, Lib Dems, Greens. I'm talking all people. Migration is on the top of everybody's agenda.
I said it 3 years ago and everybody laughed at me and said, no, it's number 3. I don't believe it. And I'll tell you why I don't believe it. I don't believe it because I think we've reached this moment where, and I thought James Price nailed it earlier when he said that we've always been this sort of sympathetic, reasonable, morally balanced nation that tries to do the right thing. We're skint and we cannot do the right thing compassionately by our own people. That's the issue, isn't it?
Yeah, and if you decide that growth, economic growth, is not so important and that you're going to prioritise other things, sooner or later you are going to run out of the abilities to do those other things because you need money. If we want to turn ourselves into the world's largest migrant hotel, we can do that if you have the money for it. But you know what we don't have? The money for that, or any of the other things that we actually want. And this is, of course, the main thing, as much as people like James Price will point out correctly, that one of the great things about this country's culture, which we're often told we're not really allowed to talk about, you're only allowed to talk about it in terms of diversity, but is, as you say, tolerance. And that actually stems from not wanting to interfere in other people's business.
Don't you think it's apologising for the past?
Well,
I don't think it's about time we stopped apologising for the past and stopped apologising to everybody and looked after our own?
I'd actually prefer people properly remembered what the past was, for a start. The whole, apologising for things. It turns out often we apologise for things that never happened as much as anything else. There is this perception that the British Empire was uniquely evil in the history of the world. Except, of course, when you compare it to every other empire or civilization that's ever existed, at which point, oh, actually, it looks quite good. But we never have that conversation because that's problematic, and then it's talking about other people's cultures not being as good as ours, and that is, of course, not very tolerant. But I would prefer it if we did that. But honestly, the fact of the matter is people in this country don't like to stick their noses into other people's business. That's where a lot of our tolerance comes from. It's not that we're come and everybody have a great old time. It's that's your business, that's nothing to do with me, so I'm not going to bother you. That, people take advantage of that.
Right, well,
when the state decides, nobody's going to question what we do. That's what it is.
I tell you, I'm going to read this, and it is quite contentious. It's from a mate of mine, Rob, but I want to read it because it makes a point that I feel really strongly about and has got me into trouble online before, but it's not meant to come out the wrong way. If we are so attractive to people, illegal migrants, because we are soft or the pull is greater, and we know that that's the reason, in my mind we should make it less attractive and less soft because we're having the mickey taken out of us. The reason I think people have switched on is because they their lives are now impacting. As you said, he says, I'm mystified that anyone in this country can't see that mass immigration is as clear and present a danger to the way we live our lives. It's changed in everything. It's beyond comprehension that these people started in power with Tony Blair and end up continuing to stay. Basically, this is going to change our lives forever. He said, I saw a newspaper article the other day that said, and I saw this over the weekend, white people could be in a minority in a certain number of years in this country. It's as if, says Rob, our eyes are wide open. This is happening. And people are allowing this to happen, especially politicians. I don't even think it's about the next election. I'm not talking about people rising up. I don't care the colour of your skin. In my mind, it's what you started with, which is we can't afford to look after what we've got. So why are we allowing more people to come in to stretch that still further? Because we're even more screwed. And the other thing is, the people that come into this country, because apparently they're trying to escape their countries, and we're so... Why do they then slag our country off and try and integrate, bring in stuff? I don't ever understand that either.
The thing to remember is, when we talk about migration in the early years, the Windrush generation and the people that came from Pakistan and British East Africa, those people came because they wanted to be British. But what we've had since then is the denigration of what it is to be British. We're told instead that Britain is not a great country, that it's a country, as you said, that needs to apologise for its sins.
Then why are you coming here?
Exactly.
Why, if it's so crappy, you coming here?
And that every other culture is equally valid. And what you then have is, if you're constantly told, as the white British majority, for example, if you're constantly told your culture is bad, and that's not actually what it really means to be British. Being British means something else. Then sooner or later, people will start to look for other things that are British. And this is what we have. The story that was on the front pages a couple of days ago, the Prevent strategy, talking about how having anti-migrant sentiments might be a sign of extremism. And it wasn't that it was actually the interesting thing. If you dove down into the story, it was the idea of ethno-nationalism, the idea that to be British, you have to be white. Now, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, that just didn't cross people's minds. It wasn't a topic of conversation. As you say, nobody would turn around and go, Chris Eubank, he's not British, or Emil Heskey, he's not British, because of the colour of his skin. But that is starting to become a question that you're seeing on the extremes. Why? Because the thing that used to unify us, British culture, has been told, nope, got to get rid of that, got to have something else.
But my basic point is, if you are so against the British culture, you can only be perceived as being here because you're taking advantage, or you believe that you can come here and change it. My point is this: if my country is so abhorrent, let me sort my country out. Don't come here, take advantage and slag it off. It's the whole, it's almost duplicitous. And of course, I get that the minute you have that sort of conversation, people jump up and down and they say, I'm not, there isn't a race. I've told the story before. There's a guy that picks me up from the station at night. He's from Bangladesh. He's been here 40 years. He is more patriotic and British than you and I, times 50 put together. He hates what's happening with illegal migrants. He thinks it's an absolute joke because his dad said, like, the Windrush generation, you are going to this country, they're going to give you an opportunity, we're going to make something for our lives, we're going to be forever grateful and forever. He's more royalist than anybody. He's more, that's what we're talking about. It's changed. People come here to take the PISS out of Great Britain, and that does my head in.
Very often the people that you will find who are most critical of this are those people who came here in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s from Pakistan and East Africa and the Caribbean.
Because they did it, in their mind, they did it correctly.
Yeah, because they strove to become British,
and provided they involved themselves, gave something back.
But now they are tarred with the same brush as everybody else. And there's this really sort of nasty expression that's beginning to take a hold, which is global majority. No longer ethnic minorities, global majority. And people don't like that. Ethnic minorities don't like being tarred with the idea that you are part of some massive blob of people and there are more of you out there in the world and therefore you have some sort of political power.
You know what, Pete? Mine's a really simple theory. I genuinely can say this with my hand on my heart. I don't care about the colour of his skin. My makeup artist, Magdalena, right? Came from Poland and dragged herself up and built a successful business with girls. She's more appalled about illegal migration than the guy that drives the car from Bangladesh, and more than you and me, because she's worked and grafted and is proud to be in Britain. We cannot afford to allow this to continue happening, and I genuinely believe that what will happen is, I'm not talking about people taking to the streets, I think people have had enough, and I don't think it matters about political parties. I think people are going to say, sorry mate, compassion and charity needs to begin at home because this is a joke.
But you know what I would say about people like Marta and Magda and those people who come and they have the work ethic?
Yes.
That's the key thing. It's the work ethic.
Yeah.
They are in so many ways amazed that we have a system that allows so many people to sponge off those
That's
who work.
the pull factor.
Yeah.
That's why people come, because we're not saying you've got to come and provide and contribute. We're saying you can come and have absolutely everything.
But this is the thing. It was bad enough when it was just white British people doing that. And there were millions of those people. And we have to then have honest questions about deindustrialization and why there were no jobs for all of those people, and why was that they were effectively doped into being, dependent on the state, because that's what it is, financial doping. Why it is that we thought that was an acceptable system for millions of people. Because, as is now happening, people from around the world are saying, they have a very laissez-faire attitude towards their borders, and it seems like it's quite easy to get money once you're there. Everybody is then going to want to come and participate. And why wouldn't they? That's the thing. If the system lets them, why wouldn't they try and do that?
I don't care what anybody says. I could stop it in a heartbeat. Love to know what you think of those people. Mass immigration, 0344 499 1000. Before we talk about winter fuel and we talk about Reform UK, I want to talk about the big news story of the day. Greta Thunberg and activists on the selfie yacht have been held by the Israelis and quite rightly forced to watch harrowing footage of October the 7th. Two things about this, although there was a picture of her eating a sandwich given by the Israelis, because it's been quite a turbulent crossing and she's had the poops, and so she needed a nice sandwich, so she's taken that. People I heard do my head in. Dawn French. Really interesting from Lorraine, this. Not Lorraine, who still works in ITV Just, it's somebody else. Dawn French's tweet was abhorrent. The mockery of the terrible barbarism carried out on October the 7th is totally offensive. Can you please explain to me, Jez, why the police are not knocking her door down, rifling through her underwear drawer and commenting on her book choices? Double standards yet again from a totally and utterly two-tier police force. The woman is not apologetic. She is just concerned about her bank balance. We can come back again and again to Lucy Connolly, who made some abhorrent comments about migrants. She took the tweet down after 3 hours. She's serving 31 months in jail. That is a really, really good point from Lorraine. Dawn French, I'm sorry, going to get away with it. Explain how that works. It's absolutely fundamentally wrong. I'm not saying go and arrest Dawn French. What I'm saying is, that poor woman's languishing in jail. She surely should have been given community service, told how that was wrong to talk about Muslims like that.
Of course, but that's because this is what the state chooses to prioritise. It chooses to prioritise going after certain people and not others. It's very interesting because this is now happening amidst the backdrop, and of course it started really ratcheting up after Southport, and we all understand why that happened. But I was fascinated. Dominic Cummings did an interview with Sky News a couple of weeks ago where he was talking about, and he's still plugged into the matrix of Westminster, and he was talking about how one of the major fears that security forces have now in this country is the sense that there is a lot of discord and unrest, and that could sort of pop off at any moment. And it tells you who it is that the authorities are more concerned by. It's that they take one group of people as being fundamentally worse ideologically than others, and they're going to target those people because those are the ones. And it's not going to necessarily be down to ideology writ large. Do you know what it'll be down to? Numbers. They will have decided, right, the number of people in this country that believe this thing is larger than believe that thing. So that's more of a problem if they start kicking off. That's why people like Lucy Connolly will be targeted more than people like Dawn French, because Dawn French is very much in the minority. It doesn't even matter if her views are trendy or not. They are the minority. The majority are what frighten the authorities.
I tell you, I don't know, something's going to give. Anyway. Let's talk about Reform UK. You've been quite vocal about Reform UK. Since I finished the show on Wednesday, Zia Youssef, who I interviewed on Tuesday for half an hour, resigned as chairman, saying he couldn't take it anymore, it was too pressurising. We believe it was on the back of the Sarah Puchin question about the burqa, supported by Badenoch today, by the way. 2 days later, he's back. Not only is he back, he's front and centre today, saying the very language that I thought got Rupert Lowe thrown out of Reform, which was, the Reform UK will deport every illegal immigrant, one of the party's most senior figures, Zia Youssef, said today. He's promised mass deportations. Does that mean that they're now thinking that that is the right thing to do? Is this Zia Youssef? I don't know the best way to put this. You wouldn't think I broadcast for a living. Is it him being strong? Is it him being more vocal than before to try and get back in favour with? I don't know. Help me out.
Possibly. I think Reform is actually behind the public on a lot of these issues, on things like the burqa or deportations. I actually think the Overton window, as they say, which is what is acceptable to think, has shifted a lot further right than anybody realises. even Reform. I think they didn't quite realise how much people are fed up with this as an issue. And I think that they're playing catch-up slightly. And I think what Sarah Pochin said, bringing up the burqa, which, let's be honest, it's something that's always there in the back of your mind, but it's a long time since it was a front-page story. And suddenly it's been brought back to the front page and everybody started going, oh, hang on, yes, I remember, this is a slightly illiberal thing. Why is it that we tolerate this? And Rupert Lowe talking about other things that, you know, perceived as being once upon a time far-right and are now considered actually sort of fairly centre-right. Reformers had to be sort of dragged along, if you like, in, you know, amidst all of that. It is seeing the reaction to the fallout with Rupert Lowe, which, let's also be clear, that's a personality clash between Farage and Rupert Lowe. So they've seen what that was, and now they've seen what's happened here with the reaction to the burqa, and they've gone, we can perhaps afford to be a little bit more unapologetically right-wing, because this is a concern of many Reform voters, especially after they saw the Rupert Lowe debacle, which is that what Reform will do is, as its polling gets higher and higher and higher, and therefore the stakes get higher because they think, wow, we might actually get somewhere with this, they might start to lose their nerve. Because that's even worse than getting into power would be almost getting there and then fluffing it.
But then let's look at the states and you know, Donald Trump has deployed the National Guard to LA to curb unrest over immigration raids. The decision has sparked fury from Gavin Newsom, I think that's brilliant, the Californian governor, that useless mayor who managed to set fire, stood whilst most of LA burnt. They're all jumping up and down. All the lefties are out. Everybody's absolutely abhorrent. Now, here's my mind. Donald Trump, love him or not, said, I'm going to carry out deportations. And he was elected, he won the popular vote for the first time in decades. He's doing what he said he was going to do. And when people start to protest against that, he sends in the National Guard. Now, that, I don't care what, sorry, I'm obviously losing my, that's what we need. That is conviction. Politician, that you might disagree.
No, I don't.
I think we're hamstrung by people who actually, interestingly, what you said before, oh, I'm near the prize, oh, I need to sanitise myself. Why don't you have the courage of your convictions, stand in front of the British people, say, this is what I'm going to do, like it or loathe it, and if you don't want it, I'll disappear, but if you do, come with me on the journey, there'll be some bumps in the road, but I'll get it done. That's it.
Do you know what I think people respond to? They respond to authority and a sign that people will get things done. That's ultimately effectiveness in authority. And this is something that I think Reform and the Tories and everybody else actually has to think about, which is people don't necessarily mind what direction it comes from. Jeremy Corbyn came a lot closer to becoming Prime Minister than a lot of people tend to remember because he offered something. All it would take would be somebody on the left, for instance, to actively offer something more coherent and be seen to be taking action on things in the same way that, for instance, Reform have offered something new, and you could very easily see a swing away from Labour in that direction as well. It just so happens that the Greens
do you know what, you know when you
useless.
talk about courage of convictions, I always say, say to my kids, have a go and fail, but you'll be able to look yourself in the mirror and say, I had a go. So you're right about Corbyn. I remember my old man, God rest his soul, was die-hard Tory. He said, he's actually, you know, he sticks to what he thinks. I think he was quite impressed. I would prefer, whether it's Farage and Reform or somebody else, to say, there I am, unsanitised, that's what it is, highs and lows, bumps in the road. If you're going to vote for me, we're going to do it. Because I think that is what the British people want to hear now.
Well, do you know what I said to Aaron Bastani of Novara Media? I thought Corbyn came along 10 years too early. He was just slightly ahead of the curve and he wasn't quite the right person. But do you know who's doing really well? Novara Media. A lot of people check out their stuff right now because there is an appetite for something that is a bit more dynamic, that actually promises change and that sort of thing, rather than what we have under Starmer, which is, ooh, the law says this is difficult, therefore we shouldn't do it. This court says we should give this thing away, even though it's monumentally stupid, we've got to do this. What they want is the opposite of a Prime Minister who sits there and goes, my hands are tied. They want somebody who goes, I'm going to break through this regulation.
Well, like Dominic Cummings, who people love to hate. One day I'll tell the story of why I think Dominic Cummings is fantastic. It's a very personal story and something he did for me, right? But that's for another day. I saw an interview at the weekend that said the reason he got rid of Boris Johnson was that Boris Johnson started to backtrack and back down to the blob and the systems, and that they'd won by saying we're going to do this, that and the other, and then he started to kowtow. Are we going to find a politician in this country who takes on the blob and takes on the establishments and takes on every other bugger, including the press, and says, I got an electoral mandate, that's what I'm going to do?
What I would say is, a lot of people are saying, with Reform doing so well, that the two-party system in this country has been broken. They're saying it's been shattered.
Do you think it has?
What I would say is, for a start, I'd say never rule out the Tories. First and foremost, if they pick Robert Jenrick to be leader, I think all of a sudden they become life players again, because he gets it in a way that just no other Tory politician seems to. He does. But what I would say is, the evaporation of support for both the Tories and the Labour Party shows me not necessarily that the system is broken, but that those old loyalties and any sense of loyalty is gone. If Farage backtracks and betrays his voters, he won't even last as long as Labour and the Tories have. He will be gone in a heartbeat. People will abandon his party because they don't even have that ingrained loyalty towards him. And that's something he will have to navigate very clearly, because he's going to have lots of different voices in his ear saying, well, actually, we should go down the sort of the free market route.
I'd go what's it or
protectionist.
bust if I was Nigel Farage. I absolutely would go full steam ahead, because one of the things that I would say about the Tories, and we go to a break, is I hear all the time from Tory politicians, we're the oldest established party, this is just a protest vote. No, it isn't a protest vote. Something is growing in this country, and you're right, you're dead right about Nigel. Really good. So he deigned us with his company from Norfolk. You're shooting tomorrow, are you?
No, not tomorrow. No. End of the weekend, maybe.
Lovely. The amazing Benedict Spence, Conservative commentator, always welcome on this show. Thank you very much indeed.